Morning, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg again. Another fireside hunting seminar. Let me tell you something. If you're a tree stand hunter, you don't want to miss this seminar. Really. You know, if you're a tree stand hunter and you're getting tired of spending all kinds of time in tree stands without seeing big bucks, wild bucks in the woods, this is the seminar you want to see. The reason is you can start seeing more big bucks in the woods, wild bucks, not fenced in bucks, wild bucks in the woods, if you do things right. You know, this last hunting season was really a good one. And not because we took our 4 mature bucks like we do every year, but because it was full of interesting, well, it was full of examples of why what I teach really works, including tree stand hunting. You know, my kids, 5 kids, grew up using tree stands for deer hunting. The reason was that they started hunting back in the 1970s and 80s, and tree stands were just, portable tree stands were just being introduced in the middle 1980s, and also doe and estrus type lure scent. So they started out with those 2 adjuncts to deer hunting, and they were terrific things to use at that time. At that time, people were wondering how come whitetails never looked up to see them in tree stands as low as 6 feet above the ground. And saw a lot of deer up close. Tree stands made bow hunting really popular because, boy, you get a lot of deer within easy fatal bow range. But and the same with doe and estrus type bucklers. Here was something that could actually attract deer to your tree stand, and it worked like crazy for years, and it was trippy. It was back during that time that I created that 12-hour video series called Whitetail Hunter's World, and it's full of big bucks, really all kinds of nice bucks, mature bucks. And about 95% of them, I've said before, as I said before, were there because they were attracted by doe and estrus type lure scents. Well, in 10 years, things started to really change. But hunters all across America never got used to the idea that there wasn't something you could buy in a store that could attract deer to your stand site, you know, up in a tree. So lures of various kinds, you know, the scent type lures and rattling antlers and calls, and more recently food plots became the big deal for attracting deer to your stand site. But like back in the 80s, when whitetails finally started to learn how dangerous hunters and tree stands can be, detecting them and identifying them and avoiding them, when they started learning that, it became more and more difficult to take whitetails, especially older deer that are 3.5 years of age or older, from tree stands. It became more and more difficult to take them using any kind of a lure or bait. There's a lot of new baits on the market today, and it doesn't take long for older whitetails to figure out the odors of those things can be dangerous if they're accompanied by human odors. And that's almost always the case with tree stand hunters who sit in one place for maybe the whole season, you know, day after day. You got downwind scent going all the time into the area where the scents that are supposed to attract the deer are going. And big bucks nowadays, they're not fooled by that at all. Not anymore. Not like they were many years ago. And it's too bad you guys that are relatively new hunters never had a chance to witness that, because boy, was that great hunting back in those days. Well, because we experienced that, and because I had already gotten a really good start at doing hunting-related research, which I started way back in the early 1960s, we didn't let it go at that. My boys and I became involved with all kinds of research, or trying out different things to try to get our hunting success back to what it was back in those 1980s. You know, it was terrific then. When my kids were just 12 years old, they were taking big bucks, great big bucks in the woods, close range. We wanted that kind of hunting back again. So we did a lot of research, and that's been going on and still going on. And I've got more to do. I hope I can live long enough to finish some of the research that I'm just getting started on now. That's going to be important in the future. I'll be talking more about that in the future. But anyway, the way people learn to use tree stands way back, and they're teaching their kids how to use tree stands today, is wrong. But it can be used in ways that really work well. But it's a lot more work, but if you want to take older bucks, it's really worthwhile. Now, the buck my son David took this last November, a couple weeks ago, was a good example of how tree stand hunting should be done today, using portable tree stands. And I'll tell you, this is the way us Nordbergs do it. Now, you can do things differently if you want, but this is the way we do it. When we start, we do a lot of good scouting. Scouting is so important to tree stand hunting, because otherwise you're just guessing. You can't just go out in the woods and put it in some nice tree somewhere and go up there and expect to see a deer, unless you're awfully lucky. That's not likely to happen. Luck is a poor thing for deer for taking older bucks. Most hunters only get one or two easy chances to take an older buck in a lifetime. Doesn't seem that way, but you got a big 10-pointer on the wall at home, that might be the only one you'll take in all your years of deer hunting if you don't do things differently. So, anyway, here's the way us Nordbergs do it. First of all, we do a lot of scouting, and we do it early. We want to be done at least 2 weeks before the opener of the deer season. The reason is, we don't, all of the sense, when we scout thoroughly. We go everywhere. We get into buck bedding areas, we go everywhere, trying to find all kinds of signs of deer, especially big tracks and big droppings of mature bucks. We're out there before they're starting to make antler rubs in the woods and ground scrapes. We hardly see any of those. We don't need those. All we need is tracks and droppings to decide where we're going to hunt. Now, when you're doing this, you have to remember there's a certain way things are set up. You know, it's like a checkerboard out there in the woods, and each one of those squares is a square mile. Well, they're oblong usually and oval in shape, but from east to west. But it depends on, the woods, and maybe there's farm fields here, and the road here, and the lake here, and the stream there, and these all kind of contribute to the shape of a dominant breeding buck, the biggest buck in the woods, his home range, which would be about a square mile in size. Some of them have 2 square miles, but most of them are about a square mile in size. He's the boss buck. He's the big dominant buck of the area. He owns that. Now he'll allow other bucks to live on his range, older bucks, any bucks from yearling bucks to bucks at the same age as he is. Some of those bucks that are the same age as he is aren't quite as large, or their antlers aren't quite as big and heavy, which gives the bigger buck some advantage when they're battling. Or they're not as aggressive. There's some big bucks out there that aren't inclined to be fighters, to be aggressive toward other deer. All these things are important. Well, genetics, of course. But anyway, he's in that square mile, and he'll allow other deer to live in that square mile to his advantage. In my study area, it's typical that there were 4 or 5 ranges of does with young within that square mile. And that's an advantage because those are the does he's going to breed. Those does that have young plus yearling does, which experience estrus during their yearling year. And yearlings live in the ranges with their mothers. In fact, this was going on opening morning this year when Dave took his 10-pointer. He was the first one to take a buck this year. Well, anyway, so keep that in mind. But he'll also allow these other bucks. There might be a couple in that square mile, a couple yearling bucks, and then maybe 2 to 4 other older bucks living in that area. But he's the boss buck, and he established his position in that pecking order of bucks in that square mile by fighting with all those other ones, and he beat up all the other ones. None of them could beat him in battle. So he's the boss buck, and he knows it, and all those other deer know it. So keep that in mind. This is the setup in this square mile. And keep that in mind too, there's only one really big buck in that square mile. A lot of guys want to see 6, 7 big bucks in that square mile they hunt. Well, I got to do something to increase the number of older bucks here and try all kinds of schemes to do that. But whitetails don't allow that to happen. That boss buck isn't going to let 6 or 7 other big bucks live within a square mile. Now, they're going to get that settled real quick. They're going to have to go find their own ranges somewhere else. So that's the way it usually works. So you're stuck with that. Now, those particular deer, especially those older bucks, they're independent. Other bucks that live in that boss buck square mile have smaller ranges, up to a half square mile in size in there. And they overlap quite a bit. Yeah, doe ranges don't overlap. They're separated by buffer zones in between. But at any rate, that's what's going on in that square mile. So you keep that in mind. So anyway, let's say you're hunting in square mile, and here's this big buck, and you want to get him. Well, if you want to get him, and it isn't a tragic thing if the biggest buck is taken out of that square mile, the next biggest buck in that local pecking order buck will take over, and usually very quickly. For some reason or another, they're able to figure out really quickly if that big buck is gone or dead. Maybe because his scents are no longer drifting all over in the air in that area. Maybe that tells him he's gone. I can take over. So, and the lesser one, the bucks lower in that pecking order, they respect that because they've been through that. They've had fights with each other for a month and a half before this happened. Well, anyway, so enough of that. Well, in our last hunting season, opening morning, Dave took a 10-pointer at 8:45. Now, in many years, almost all of the bucks we take are taken during the first 2 legal shooting hours of the day. It's a rule in our camp to get up at 4 o'clock. And we're on our way to stand sites already at 5 o'clock because we want to get to our stand sites 1/2 hour before first light in the morning. Now there are hunters all over America that just want to argue endlessly about whether this is the right thing to do. You go out there and chase them all the way in the dark, you don't have a chance to shoot at them. That's not a good way to hunt. Well, of course it isn't if you don't do things right. You know, the way we do it, it's awfully hard for the buck we're trying to take, in most cases. Sometimes we just aren't sure exactly where he is, but it's awfully hard for the buck that we would like to take to know we're there a half hour before first light in the morning. Because our approach trail to the stand site is characterized by really dense cover at ground level. It's lots of evergreens, lots of trees, lots of brush. You can walk through it because we have selected deer trails to get there that enable us to get there without snapping a lot of branches, without stepping a lot of dead twigs on the ground, branches on the ground, in the dark. Our trail is marked by fluorescent tracks to get there. Like this last year, we had 4 inches of fluffy snow on the ground opening morning. Boy, is that great for walking almost silently. And we don't stop when we go to the stand, because when you stop a lot, you might sound like a wolf or a bear who's hunting, stopping and sniffing and listening. Yeah, people can argue about that all you want, but if they do hear your footsteps and they're steady, not stopping, just keep moving steady, you're not hunting, you're going somewhere. If you happen to be a wolf, you're not hunting, but if you're stopping often to sniff and stare around, look for a deer, you're hunting. You're not fooling older bucks. There's a lot of other sounds that are made by deer when they're feeding that you aren't making, like chewing. And gee, in November when they're eating browse, when they chew, they're making pretty good noise, crunch, crunch, crunch. Maybe it isn't really obvious to you, but it's obvious to other deer because they have much better hearing than you do. But we have excellent cover that hides us on the way to stand. Some of our best stand sites we get to because there's a high ridge that we're on this side, and the feeding area that we're going to be watching is on the other side, and you can go all the way to the stand site without being seen because there's high rocky ridges between you and where the deer are when they're feeding. They're out there shortly after 4 in the morning starting the feeding. They're feeding when we go out there early in the morning. We know that. And we know you can't go up over the top of that ridge with a flashlight. We know that would alert those deer immediately. They know if we're stepping on a lot of twigs going in there, they'd hear that even if they could see you, and they'd know you're a human when that kind of thing. We don't drag our heels when we're walking. When you make that kind of sound, when you're dragging the heels, deer know you're a human. There's all kinds of things we do. There's 30-some precautions we take every day when we're going to a stand site. Not just 2 or 3, but 30-some. So now, in Dave's case, that's one of the things when we're scouting, we pick a stand site for hunting a big buck. We want excellent cover for your tree stand. It can't, not just at ground level, but up there where you are. We don't cut all kinds of branches down. You're going to see examples of Dave's stand and the kind of cover he used. We don't cut all this stuff down so your silhouette is obvious to a deer around you. We want cover all around, even at stands at the level of your platform up in the tree. The higher you go, the less you're hidden or screened by natural cover around you. We're really careful about that. I mean, normally, we're expecting, here's a feeding area out in front of you. Between you and where they are, you got lots of cover in front of you. You might have just little holes in the cover where you can shoot, or maybe over here you got a little wider area and another one over here where you could shoot a deer that's out there. And a lot of guys that are used to going out and say, oh, I want to be able to see way over there and way over there and way out that way. And they figure that's the most important thing because that way you're going to see more deer. Well, maybe in some areas, like in Michigan, where there's 30 deer per square mile, you might see more deer going that way, but you won't see many big bucks. If you're exposed, if you can see them, they can see you, and big bucks are well aware of what a big dark silhouette up in a tree is nowadays. They know that's a hunter, somebody to stay away from. And they might circle down in and get a sniff. Yeah, that's a hunter, all right. I'm going to stay away from here the rest of this hunting season. So, ground level cover for your approach, especially in that last 100 yards, is really important. You've got to be able to get that stand site without being easily seen by deer in the feeding area. They're already there when you're going out there in the morning. If they can see you clearly for any reason, that's not a good stand site. And if you don't make sure that you're well hidden going to your stand site tomorrow, and you got a quiet trail, and you pick up your feet when you're rocking, and all kinds of things like that, of course you're going to frighten deer. But we don't do that. It doesn't work every time, I admit that. Every once in a while I'll get close, and at the last minute, damn, there's a deer snorting over there in that feeding area, and sometimes I'll even hear a buck run out there and it's dark, and come first light, they're gone. That happens, but not every time. Every once in a while it works perfectly. Now in Dave's case, he went in to his stand site from crosswind, from the northeast, going east, and the wind was from the northwest. So it's crosswind all the way to stand site. You can't always go in from downwind, and it isn't always the best thing to do. You know, if you plan to go back to a stand site next to a feeding area from downwind early in the morning, you're leaving trail scent all the way there. And then later in the day you go back there and say, well, I'm going to go back there. Well, where are the deer going to approach that feeding area from in the evening? Well, from downwind. They're going to run into your trail scent, which is less than a day old. Big bucks aren't going to be careless about something like that. They're going to say, oh no, I'm not going to go to this place. And then, especially if you went out there in the afternoon and your trail scent was just maybe an hour or two old, the buck comes along, oh, there's a human over there, I'm not going there. I don't care if there's a doe and estrus there, I'm not going there. So, anyway, those are things that are important. But going in crosswind, well, you can go back to the end of the day and still, if they come in from downwind, they're not going to smell you. Your trail scent, so it won't have an effect on you later on. But these are things that we're always thinking about, you know. But anyway, Dave found all kinds of large tracks of them to a buck, and droppings of them into a buck. Tracks that were probably 3 3/4 inches long, the hoofs only, in the dirt. You know, when we were scouting 2 weeks early, and picking out slant sites, and in Dave's case, putting up some tree stands. The same way with my son Ken and his son, they do that at the same thing. But anyway, they're doing that, and they would never put a tree stand anywhere where there aren't tracks of a big buck, fresh tracks of a big buck, and fresh droppings. Otherwise, you're just guessing. You might as well be in your backyard in a tree. The way to stay close to big bucks every day is to always hunt within easy shooting distance of very fresh tracks and droppings of a big buck. That's where they are. You know, they don't wander throughout that square mile every day. They only wander through about 10% along certain trails that might be different tomorrow, and they're only visiting certain sites. The sites they're visiting are where the does are feeding. And they're looking for does in heat. And when we're with a doe in heat, they're only with her for a day, because individual does are only in heat for 24 to 26 hours. And all the rest of the does in that square mile might not be in heat that day. They went different times over a 2-week period. So anyway, does have everything to do with where the bucks are or where they go every day. And you want to be in that 10% where the buck is any one day. Well, your best chance when you're scouting is find a feeding area, especially a browse area. You know, our season started on 9th, and by that time our deer are eating browse. They're eating red osiers and sugar maple saplings, things like that, mountain maples. They're in browse areas.
We have an injured doe in our backyard.
Oh, fine. Hold on.
Look at her.
It's feeding. Eating browse. Oh, poor thing. Oh. She seems healthy enough otherwise.
Doesn't look like a bad injury.
Looks like that joint that's up, you know, it looks swollen compared to the other leg. It's that joint there that's injured. You know, here we are in a residential suburb of Minneapolis. And a deer just made a liar out of me. When I said, you might as well be sitting in your backyard in a tree and you won't see any deer. Well, there's a doe out there, but it's a cripple. It probably is, the right front leg is there's something wrong with it. It can't put any weight on it, but it doesn't seem to be, you know, fatally injured. It's standing out there eating browse, but walking around on three legs, poor thing. So, anyway, back to business here. I just got done talking about how important some things are when you're scouting, like really good cover on the way to a tree stand, especially in the last 100 yards. Actually, ideally, you should never get closer than 200 yards upwind of your stand site when you're on your way to stand site. If you have to make a big detour like Dave did, he made quite a long detour, about a mile long detour, to get to a point where he could go crosswind through very dense cover to get to his stand site. Utilizing deer trails that were cleared of dense branches before the hunting season started. So, and then he picked a stand site. He put his tree stand on a popple tree all by itself. The popple tree didn't provide any real significant cover for him while he's up there above the ground. But it's in the midst of a lot of evergreens. And even while standing in that stand, he could just barely see over the tops of the evergreens in front of him. And great stand site. No chance that deer in the direction that he was of the feeding area spread out in front of him, would be able to see him there unless he would really move violently, quickly, that kind of thing. So wonderful stand site, wonderful cover on the way to stand, wonderful trails to use, a series of deer trails that took him to the stand site, which he found and selected while he was scouting. Now, my boys and grandsons who use tree stands opening weekend don't just sit in one stand the rest of the hunting season, like most hunters in the United States do. No, they when they're out there scouting, they look for at least 4 or more stand sites that have similar characteristics. Good cover, good a well-hidden trail leading to the stand site, and from different directions, because you never know what direction the wind is going to be blowing from on any one day of a hunting season. So they always want to be able to go to a stand site where they're likely to see a big buck, no matter what direction the wind is blowing from. In this case, the wind was blowing from the northwest, and Dave said, aha, I can go, well, using the trails I have set up, I can go crosswind to get to this feeding area. The deer in the feeding area won't smell me going all the way there, and they won't see me either. So that's always important. That morning, Dave got to his tree stand without deer, obviously without deer in the area, knowing he was a human. Now, we've learned over the years it is awfully hard to fool deer into believing you're a deer by the sounds of your footsteps. So you know, I've talked about this in a previous seminar about precautions we take on the way to the tree stand, and Dave does all that. We all do that, no matter what stand site we're going to. But anyway, he did all these things. So we get there a half hour before first light in the morning, and the reason we do that, it's almost certain, I think, not always, but almost certain, unless they're not really close at the time, that they're going to hear something, and they're going to wonder what it is. And if they're a big buck, if it's a big buck that's involved, he's going to be super cautious. And he's going to wonder for a while, what made those sounds up there or over to one side. And generally, you know, when you get your stand sight, then from that moment on, you're sitting there silently, you're not moving, not making sounds, and if there's no more of these sounds that you made going on for the next half hour, nothing else happens, those deer will finally decide whatever it was, it either went on by and we didn't hear it go on by, or it's bedded or something, but it's obviously not dangerous. That's what they'll decide. And nothing here to worry about now. So let's go back and eat. So in about a half hour, you'll start seeing deer again. And we want to be there the moment it becomes legal to shoot your gun at a deer. You know, the first part of the first legal shooting hour of the day. You know, like I say, people argue about this all the time about whether you should do that or not. And like I say, of course it might be wrong for you if you can't do all of these things to keep that from happening, and if you can't find the cover that you need to make sure, and if you don't clean your trail there to get there, things like that. If you don't make a big detour if you have to in order to be able to get there, or if the wind's wrong or whatever, of course you're going to have problems. But we don't, it doesn't happen to us a lot. Once in a while. Anyway, so he got to a stand sight. So by first light, deer were moving. He watched two does. One was probably a yearling living in its mother's range, a yearling doe, and a doe with a fawn in that area. It was feeding on browse. And it doesn't matter if the doe is in heat or not. When it's time to feed, they feed. They don't stop keeping that schedule going. So you can't tell normally whether a doe out there that's feeding is in heat or not. But a little while later, about 8:30, somewhere around that point, they started to get a pretty good idea that one of those does was in heat. And when he heard a buck grunt, a low gurgly grunt, Dave's buck appeared from crosswind on the opposite side of this feeding area, out in front of him. They couldn't see it, but it was down there, it was the other side of that opening. And a little bit later, he heard another grunt, and this time it was much louder, meaning, oh, it's getting closer. So Dave carefully stood up in a stand so he could see over these evergreens right in front of him, and he was watching over in the direction that he heard the sounds. And all of a sudden, there was a buck, and facing him, and looking up, and you could see, gee, it's got a little bit of spread, and it's got lots of points, and it was probably the big buck that made all the signs that were in there. It was a 10-pointer, and maybe not as big as he had hoped it would be, but that's not uncommon. You know, where we hunt, 300-pound dominant breeding bucks are common, but generally bucks that size are about 5.5 years of age. Now the last few years our deer numbers have been way down, and in this case quite a few of our dominant breeding bucks, you know, the buck that owns this range and one that owns that range, that square mile over there, are younger bucks. This year we had 3.5-year-old bucks that were dominant breeding bucks. That's kind of unusual. Usually they're older, bigger. A 3.5-year-old buck where we hunt, maybe it will go 195 pounds. Where one of our big dominant breeding bucks, that's 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, may go 305 pounds and dress out about 245 pounds. That's a huge deer. Well, it looked pretty good, so Dave decided that's the buck he's going to probably see here, and one of these does must be an estrus because he's coming this way, and here's the does, and they're feeding, and this is a common occurrence when you're hunting feeding areas while breeding is in progress. So here comes this buck, and it was about 80 yards away. In between Dave and where the buck was, quite a bit of brush, a 7-year-old popple. He couldn't have seen that deer, or much less shoot it from that range if he hadn't been up in that tree stand. And that gave him the advantage in this case. And that's Sure, that's one of the advantages of a tree stand. But we have really good stand sites where we hunt that are not in trees, but on top of like a rocky outcropping, and you're up there 20 feet, 25 feet above an area where deer like to feed. Boy, that makes a nice tree stand, or a nice stand site. You don't have to be in a tree in a place like that. And I'll talk about one of those places maybe next time. But anyway, but Dave's a good shot, and he got his gun up slowly and went really carefully about this and took good careful aim, and was almost offhand, but he could lean against the tree to help steady his aim, and fired, and down it went. He fired at the base of its neck. A very fatal shot in that case. So he got his 10-pointer, 8:45, 8:45, opening morning. I remember sitting in the woods and I heard that shot, and I noticed the direction from which I heard the shot. It was straight west of where I was. I said, it has to be Dave. And sure enough, it was. And of course, he was a happy man when that buck came to camp. And so, it wasn't the hugest 10-pointer. Turned out it was a 3.5-year-old 10-pointer. And this kind of things this situation we have to accept in our hunting area until our deer numbers are growing again. I sure hope that happens one of these days, but because we have an excessive number of wolves in the area, which are constantly hunting our deer, and we've had some really severe winters, several of them in the last 10 years, that have really reduced deer numbers, we're stuck with this. But we love the area, we love to hunt there, and so buck like Dave took, that's a decent buck, and those antlers will probably end up in the wall in his den one day. And but he was pleased with that, and so were we all, because we had buck heart hors d'oeuvres in camp that evening. You'd call it Happy Camp buck heart hors d'oeuvres. And the way I cook them, they're really good, and they don't last long. People, we're standing around with toothpicks eating these pieces of buck heart that I've cooked up with mushrooms, and really enjoying them. And so that was a great start to our past hunting season. 10-point, 8:45 opening morning. Now, we didn't get all our deer that early. Some years we do, some years, every one is taken during those first 2 hours, or the first hour even, or even minutes after legal shooting time begins. But we got 2 of them early in the morning. We got 2 in the evening. You know, this guy said, oh, I only get them in the evening. One of my best friends, old Silver, he says, I always did best in the evening. And he did again this year. But if you only hunt in the evening like he does, well, that's when you're going to get them, in the evening. But we took 2 in the evening, sure, and 1 midday. Yeah, there's a situation where midday is great too, and I talked about that last time. That's when John got his second buck, midday. And I told you all about that one, so different times during the day. And there's a lot of guys that say, oh, I always get mine between 11 and 2 or 3, middle of the day. Well, yeah, if you hunt during that time, and once in a while certain weather conditions will trigger midday feeding, that's when you're going to get most of your bucks. But for us, I'll tell you, for me, at least 85% of all the mature bucks I've taken since 1990 have been taken during the first hour or 2 of the day. So you're not going to talk me into hunting at any other time. And since we've learned how to get to our stand sites in darkness without alerting or alarming all the deer in the area and the feeding areas that we get to in the darkness, we get a lot of deer during that time. So that's a favorite time for us. But don't feel badly. If you feel you only get them in the evening or midday, go ahead and keep hunting during those times. But one thing you don't want to do if you're a tree stand hunter, don't keep sitting in that one stand site the rest of the hunting season. Look at the guys that go and they go out there every day for a month. And a big buck. Well, that's kind of crazy. And now you know why. So, well, even if you're a tree stander, you should have several tree stands set up before hunting season begins. And that's what we do. Like Dave and Ken and their sons usually have at least 4 good spots, different bucks. Sometimes 2 for the same buck in different areas, and different feeding areas within a square mile, or at one big one in different spots on the same feeding. But at least 4 for opening weekend. They want 4 because they want to change stand sites every half day. And they want to be able to go one of those no matter what direction the wind is blowing from. So the way to really increase your odds of taking a big buck from tree stands is to hunt different trees. Now, if you want to stay on one for an entire day, I won't argue with you about that. That can be fine. That's fine. Use 1 per day, but don't stay in that tree stand more than a day. 2 successive hunting, or 2 successive half days of hunting. Maybe 3 at the most. A lot of times I'll find deer sign on opening day that I want to hunt the following morning. Anyway, you have to hunt. You have a succession of tree stands to hunt, and your odds will be much better, especially if they're always within easy shooting distance of very fresh tracks and or droppings of a buck, a mature buck, and your silhouette is really well covered while you're in that tree stand or screened, and if you can get to that tree without being easily seen by deer in the feeding area where they're going to be when you go there in the morning. So those are important parts. There's other important parts too, the way you walk on the trails, the things you do to make it silent, or as silent as possible, things like that to know. But nowadays, in the old days, back in the 80s, you could sit in one tree stand and it's just a matter of time and a buck would come along. It's a lot less likely to happen. And you know that, well, if you start using multiple stand sites like I'm suggesting, you're going to do a lot better. Now, the reason that my boys set up multiple tree stands because it is really tough, especially when you're hunting older bucks, to take a tree stand of a tree and carry it to another place and put it in another tree close to where this buck is now, trail you're using now, or this feeding area, without deer in the area knowing it. Maybe the buck himself won't know it, but the other deer, any deer that are near there will know it, and they'll all be alerted or spooked by what you did, and they're going to stay away from that. And if they're going to do that, bucks always allow other deer to be in the vanguard of their movements. If these deer are going toward the stand site and they say, oh no, we don't want to go out there, and this buck is with them because the doe is in estrus, in heat, he's not going to go out there either. A lot of times, even when he's with one, he'll allow the doe and his fawn to go out there and start feeding and watch from cover along the edge of a feeding area for quite a while, 15 minutes, half hour. If nothing's happening, the doe is not in any danger, the doe is not acting like it's been alerted or alarmed by something, then he'll go out there. That's pretty common. So you kind of think you should be expecting. But hunt from more than one stand site. Don't stay on one overly long. The longer you hunt there, the less your odds are of taking a buck there. So after that, my sons, Dave and Ken and their sons began hunting from ground level using stools. And there's a good reason for that. Because by day 3, every mature buck in the square mile that you've hunted knows you are hunting them. Our deer know that. Gee, we've been doing this for 30 years in this area now. And they got us figured out. So we've got to outguess them. We never go somewhere and hunt, just say, oh, this looks like a good spot. So we're always close. We're always in the ball game. We're always close to where we're likely to see the buck. And in time, it always pays off. Okay, with that, that's enough, guys. We'll talk more about other deer that we took this coming year. It covers pretty much the gamut of what us Nordbergs like to do when we're hunting bucks. So we'll get back to some of these other deer and other situations, but this was one, and it's an important one. And if you want to take big bucks and you're a tree stand hunter, that's the way you should be doing it. Okay? Well, anyway, now, like I've said before, you're probably tired of hearing this, but everything you need to know about tree stand hunting is found in this for big bucks. You know, if you don't mind shooting young deer, well, maybe you don't need it, but even then, this would be something that would really improve your odds for taking deer, no matter what kind of deer you will settle for. But anyway, get your book, you know, and if you haven't ordered one yet, or if you haven't written a letter to Santa, you should talk to Santa Claus about this. There's still plenty of time. You can get your book, an autographed book, enjoy the hunting you've been dreaming of for years and years and years. So do that, and you'll be glad you did. With that, be sure to subscribe. You know, that's important to me, so I can keep doing these seminars for you. Subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, just takes a minute. And then also poke that thumbs up button. That's just as important for my future as a seminar speaker for you. And I've got lots more of exciting things to teach you in the future. So thanks again, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.